call the meeting to order. First order of business is approval of our minutes for the June 11th, excuse me.
It was September.
September,
I
yes.
had a wonderful
Just
time
read
not getting
September.
my June and September straight this last week.
So we're going to approve the minutes for the September 10th meeting. Hopefully you've all had a chance to go over and look at them. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Okay, moved. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, moved and seconded. All in favor of approving the minutes as written, say aye. Okay. Now we are going to move on in the agenda to the public comment section. Do we have anyone here to make public comments? Okay. Okay then, we'll move on to the board briefing and business. Caroline?
Okay. If you're not familiar, the municipal calendar is in October to end of September. So we sort of closed out fiscal year 2024. This means a lot of grants are in the final stages. Things are being sort of wrapped up. So we had one grant that we worked on with the Downtown Rail Development Authority. It was a ground penetrating radar for Lafayette Cemetery. It predates much of the built environment in the city, but because the cemetery is so old and had been abandoned for so long, it's sort of in disheveled appearance. They were able to identify 25 unique stone markers, which means there's a minimum of these, may have been more originally, but what is currently extant are 25. And with the ground penetrating radar, they located 9 potential unmarked burials as well. And they just stayed within that area. They also looked, there's a retaining wall. Let's see, can you see my mouse up there? No, it will not show. So that metal building that you see sort of on the edge of the green there towards the back, that is several feet. Hey, Lamar, we just lost our image. All right, I'll keep talking. Oh, there we go. All right, it's magic. It didn't want you to come over there. So, yeah, I know. We were having issues with that TV before the meeting started, so fingers crossed it will stay with us for an hour. There is a retaining wall there because there is a substantial grade difference between the cemetery, and they must have excavated when they put that metal building in. The retaining wall is partially masonry, and at some point somebody got bags of concrete, stacked them up in a wall format, and let the rain just turn them solid. So you literally have concrete bags that have solidified that are holding it up on one portion. Portions of that entire wall are failing, and that was one of the things that they marked as something that we might want to look at, is getting someone that can work with historic masonry to come in to rebuild portions of the wall, because obviously you don't want that within a burial place. So that survey has been finished. Austinville, you'll recall, you had to close out at the last meeting with Austinville. I did follow up on that. There was discussion last time on 3 possible markers. One is for the cemetery, one is for the the community of Austinville as a whole, and then there was discussion of the old jail. So the cemetery is managed by the city. There is an Austinville Park where we could potentially do a marker that talked about the city, the community as a whole. The jail is privately owned, and so that is something that the owners would have to make a decision with that building, what they wanted to do. And if they wanted a marker, I have their address. John will help me with sending a letter out to them, sort of letting them know the importance of the structure and what resources might be available to them if they wish to pursue anything with it. On projects that are nearing completion, one is there are some old tourism brochures on the city's site. These were digital only, but they were really wonderful. One was on historic Decatur combined. One was just old Decatur, one was Albany, and you'd click or download these and open them up. The information in them, John and I sort of went through them. The information was a little bit spotty on some. Like one of them said that Old State Bank, the front portico had been completely enclosed with brick and nobody knew it was there. And this is an official publication for the city. And we're reading this thinking, we don't know why they wrote this in the early 2000s, but this is not true. So they're not online anymore. We pulled them all offline. So what we have done is we've gone back to Macomb. They had the original digital files, thankfully, and John and I together have worked to update those. So they are in design process. John, I would expect in the next few weeks we will have ones to review. These are not extensive because they already had existing documents formatted. We made minor changes in buildings. We just focused on text. So every great once in a while, there was a building that we said, okay, we're going to pull this off of the tour and we're going to sub another building. But for the most part, we left the buildings in place and we just really worked hard to make sure the data with each building was correct. Tourism has asked me to work with them on actual walking tours for Albany and Old Decatur. We have a draft of that I've been working on, but we want to wait until this project crosses the finish line before we create a new brochure that has. This project is really more designed for driving because it's so much bigger for both neighborhoods, and then that would allow us to do a little bit more for a new one. The underrepresented community grants, so that closes down in the spring in 2025. We have the 2 podcast deliverables have come through. We also have the historic context statement that has been submitted. From the National Park Service end, their big deliverables were 2 new or 2 updated National Register nominations. I'm working on those. One is going to be to tell a story of Old State Bank with a lot of the data that was missing out of the original nomination. The other is updating some of the resource information on East Old Town, specifically focusing on First Missionary Baptist Church and its importance with civil rights, because that's not really clarified in the existing nomination, and we want that to be highlighted better. Delano Park, the Historic Structures Report and Master Plan. I am currently about halfway through the final draft of that, working on revisions with the team. They have one more meeting with Delano Park Conservancy. I think they have finished the last of their meetings with the city as this sort of moves through. This has been a really wonderful project. The architectural firm, Lord Eric Sargent, has been fantastic to work with all of the public outreach and the online surveys for people and really getting a sense of what the park could be. So we have current projects. So Old State Bank, of course, is going to be one for a while. This one we have now moved into final engineering, which will take us into construction documents, and then we go into cost estimating. So to give you an idea, it's been a while since you've been to the bank. You walk in, and if you turn to the right, there is that fireplace and that door to go upstairs. This is preparing for selective plaster removal, and this is done when you have a historic building and the engineers cannot see what's the roof, the ceiling trusses, and the floor trusses always look like. So they want portions of it removed. So this is what it looks like after, so that we can get in there. They can really see, like, is the structure sound? How far apart are the floor joists? What is sort of working? We've had a few surprises. We might know why there's some cracks in some places now. We removed some plasters and we're like, oh, this probably explains that. We have one more small plaster section to remove. We think we may have located a door that was filled in at one point, an original door, and we're hoping to get that looked at in the next week. What was interesting is when they removed the plaster, and this building has almost no original finishes left. This building is so old and has been reworked and damaged and reworked so many times. But nothing's ever plumb in these old structures. And so when they plaster, you can have areas where the plaster is really thick and areas where it's really thin, which is why if anyone ever buys a historic house and decides to pull all the plaster down and thinks they could just put drywall back up, that's why nothing ever fits right, because it's not plumb. So these 2 pieces of plaster were taken within about 2 feet of each other. And there's a huge difference in the thickness, and that gives you an idea of the variation you get in a historic structure when, Everything that is smooth and level, those are all illusions. So then we were very fascinated by the thickness of that classroom on one side. No one had ever seen anything quite that thick. So we are hoping that by spring we will have cost estimating and construction documents ready to go on this. Since our last meeting, I did receive word from the state that we have been awarded 2 grants that are certified local government grants for this year. For the first one is to do a conditions assessment on the Carnegie. The Carnegie is a city-owned building. It started as a Carnegie Library. It is now a visual arts center, and it is managed by the Visual Arts Center. The floor is showing some signs of deflection. There have been some challenges with the mosaics in the front entryway coming up out of the substrate. So we decided the building is old enough at this point. We want a full conditions assessment, which will then tell us like what needs to be approved, how it needs to be approved, what the final product should be. We had 2 firms respond to our request for qualifications. LAS was voted on as meeting the requirements the best. That is the same firm that is doing Old State Bank. They also are currently working on Delano Park, and they have done the Princess before. They have a very strong background in preservation, and it shows. When they sent in comps, they had worked on 3 other Carnegie libraries, including one in Huntsville. So it was just very helpful for them. And Lamar?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, it just blinked out and it blinked back in again.
Yeah, I'm so sorry about that.
That's okay. If you glare at it, maybe it'll stop blinking.
I've been going there and stuff.
So we're working on a contract for that now. Hopefully, the holidays are kind of here now, so it's taking a little bit longer, but hopefully the contract will be in place by the middle of January. Oh, it's not showing what's on my screen.
Guys, I'm so sorry. It's kind of annoying.
I feel slightly better about all my emails going out sideways this morning. It's clear. Although you could say I'm the common denominator of all of these. So that is our first CLG award that we have. Our second one is on the screen. Thank you. Our second one that we received is to update the Albany Commercial National Register District, which is what most of us think of as 2nd Avenue. This was surveyed, reviewed about 2 years ago. If you remember Jamie DeStefano, she came and gave me the update on Austinville. She was someone that closed it out. Her firm 2 years ago resurveyed the existing National Register for 2nd Avenue. And when they resurveyed it, the original boundary was found to be small, and that based on her research we could expand the National Register District. There were also a couple of places where we needed to reduce the size of the existing footprint because buildings had been removed. So what we're looking at here is everything that's got the red line around it would be a potential new boundary. We have a contract for this in place. It'll be with council by the end of this month, and so in January her firm will start working on updating this National Register nomination. I say an update, but when you're at the point when you expand the period of significance, you expand the boundary, and you have a boundary reduction, it's actually harder than writing a new nomination. It's essentially redoing it from scratch, but having to tie in all of the 20 to 30-year-old data, so it's a fairly complex process. This should be finished by the end of summer in 2025 is when we're expecting this to be finished. I still have grants that are out that we've not heard back if we have won yet or not. With the success of the first underrepresented community grants, and that is a federal grant, I have requested a second round of funding. I do not know if we will receive it. They have very few of these grants that are awarded, and we've already received one, so it's sort of like going back for seconds at the buffet. They might say we just don't have enough right now. But what I requested in this round is to focus on the landscapes that remain either when communities are so successful when the people leave, the built environment changes. And so Cedar Lake is an example of that, where it was a designated community for African Americans. They did very well, but as they did well, they left, they moved. And then the community sort of came apart and disappeared, in part because they were successful, but then that means you have very little of the built environment left. And so the National Park Service, you have to have a National Register nomination as a deliverable for one of these. So my argument on this is, hey, we have one church that is from that period of significance. It's from the 1960s. They have an existing Baptist church. Could we nominate that? But this would give us the funding to really do a deep dive on that community to see what happened to the people, where did they go, what did the community look like before it was erased, locate things. And the church, this church is very enthusiastic about being placed on the National Register nomination, so I've had meetings with their pastor. You're also looking at Carver Elementary there. It would be nice to get more documentation on East Town, which is what this neighborhood was called at one point. Carver Elementary is extant. It is eligible for the National Register. It would be nice to see this listed. If it were listed, it would give access to other pots of money, including civil rights funding that the Park Service has. Laura, I hate to tell you, but it's blinked on us again. And then to look at Sykes Cemetery, because so many of the important people that were within the African American community are buried at Sykes, but their businesses or homes no longer remain, making Sykes the only tangible portion of that heritage, and looking at that as well. So that's what I've requested. I would think by the end of January I will hear. They don't actually really tell you officially on their site. For Old State Bank, there is a National Park Service grant called a HERS grant. It's
what grant, Carolyn?
HERS, H-E-R-S. It's History of Equal Rights. It is up to $750,000 for what we call a brick and mortar project, which is addressing a building or a structure. I submitted a grant for Old State Bank and specifically tied it in with the history of Cherry Keys, with Lila Edmondson, and with, Carolyn Courtner Smith. So I think it was a strong application because we had 3 very powerful women that we've got really good history on, especially considering the amount of time that has lapsed with some of these women and how old they would have been if they were still alive. So I submitted that, but it's too soon for me to know if we received that grant either. And lastly, one more federal grant. First Missionary Baptist Church has substantial deferred maintenance that is damaging the building. They need significant funds. Their pastor reached out to me, and we jointly worked together on an application for a civil rights grant for the church. It's $500,000. We both spent a lot of time working on it. It is not a city grant, it is a grant that would go directly to the church from the National Park Service. But to help make them competitive, we've listed me in there as someone that can help support the project because it's within the city and the needs. It's too soon to know. Again, all 3 of these that I've applied for, they're all under the same umbrella within the Park Service, and my understanding is that it's sometime December, January is when you're normally notified. So fingers crossed, by the time we meet in March, hopefully at least one, if not all of these will have been funded. If we get all 3, I might actually pass out. It's a big deal to get one. Like, it's a huge deal to get one. So if we manage to get more than one, we're going to be very excited. For future, we have board training. I'm going to be working with the Architectural Review Board. I'll be sending out an email in the next couple of weeks looking at potential times that we can do training. They are normally on an afternoon, sometimes a Saturday. It will depend on what is best for people and when we can meet. Also for 2025, I've got meeting dates here. I will send those. We have one that has moved, the March one. Moved from March 6th. I don't think that's right. Let me look at my calendar. That one. That was March 11th. So it should have been March 11th. Whoops, this does not like me today. This one was me, not you, Laura. So when you look at the calendar, the March one is off by a week, and that's just, we've got spring break during that week, and I'm going to be out of town, so we can't have a meeting when I'm not here. So that one is moved up a week to accommodate that. Any questions on any of the projects, closed out ones, future ones? I did meet with a representative from another consulting firm, and we drove around Decatur looking at possible modern neighborhoods to survey. We were looking at some by Walter Jackson. There's some really strong houses over there. Although in terms of survey and inventory, it's time for us to resurvey Albany residential. So when I start putting together funding at the end of 2025, those requests, that's probably the next one up. But I always like to keep an eye out because sometimes the state has extra money, and if we have shovel-ready projects, then I can apply for things. Any questions?
Do I have any questions? No comments? Bill, you're usually good for something.
No, I was just curious about the Lafayette Street Cemetery, where we are as far as the city adopting it. I've also driven by a couple of times. They created, when the downtown redevelopment went through and did their survey, they created a lot of trash, piles of sticks and stuff that I've asked them a couple of times to clean and pick up, and they haven't done that. So I've been a little disappointed with them, you know, in the fact that, you know, we're working with them to go through and get them to incorporate that whole area to a park, but I can't. They went through and, you know, the Eagle Scout project that was there, they essentially destroyed it when they went through, and we lost part of it when they set the stuff outside the limits and people hauled it off, and so.
One lesson I'm learning around here is if you temporarily remove anything, scrap people will come and get it, even if it's on your property. You know, I mean, it's fences and
And that was the problem I had with them. If they took it out, after they got through, they should have put it back. Now, the benches, me and my son-in-law, we did go and establish those and brought those back into the cemetery. But the other, what's the name of the structure? Yeah, got hauled off. But I just wish someone, I've contacted them a couple times. I can't get any response out of them. I wish they would just clean up the mess that they generated when they went through and did their ground penetrating radar. Is the only comment I have on that. And I am curious about where we're at as far as the city going ahead and adopting the Lafayette Street Cemetery.
I don't have any answers.
I believe for those, we don't have legal here today, but I can follow up and ask legal if it's been placed on an agenda that they're aware of.
Well, anything else? I guess we can take a motion to adjourn. Anyone want to make a motion? Are we going to stay here forever?
I'll make a motion.
All right.
I'll second.
All right. All right. Thank you, everyone.